Hello there, welcome to the value of everything. Alright, we are going to explore the nuts and bolts of sex with robots. Whoa, this is going to be, just before you get excited and get your lube out, this ain't exactly what you're expecting. This is just a sort of an exploration of a few ideas with artificial intelligence and how it's potentially going to change human society. Now, I've done a few podcasts on AI before. Some of them I've brought out some fairly goodish ideas. I definitely would recommend that you would explore those as well as a point of reference to this discussion as well, this monologue as well. So, firstly, with sex and robots, there's a couple of two directions that I want to get into first. One of them is obviously just the physical sex side of things, which is obvious. But then I just want to spend a little bit outside of that and go a little bit deeper into the reasonings of sex and everything else. So, firstly, I saw that there was this news article from somebody, a lecturer in Leicester University. It was a lady who's very concerned about the potential of artificial intelligence, which was going to be introduced into our world at some point in time, where you can get these prosthetic dummy dolls, which originally were like in the 70s, nice big blow-up things, but now they're getting very human-like, and you can really get them to be quite programmed to be fairly emotionally intelligent, so they can almost converse with you. So, obviously, I guess from that woman's perspective, she's saying that there is a potential for our replaceability here. I guess I'm not going to be probably the greatest lover of all time. But and I guess a machine can last longer than me and all those kind of things. But I guess there is still the human aspect of touch, feelings, emotions, which is going to be missing. And it's going to be pretty hard to replace. And sometimes in relationships, you do need a little bit of pain to grow and improve on oneself. So you can't just all have all the joy and nothing else. I think it would be fairly a strange relation. Like if you think of like an example of like an old man who's been single all his life and obviously spent a lot of time just probably using pornography and things like that. If you look at the house or the lifestyle that he lives, it's slightly more inclined to be I would say a little bit of a mess. His nutrition is a little bit poorer. His health, his happiness, all of these things have been affected by not having a woman in his life. So there is definite sort of perspectives here of if you do choose to have sort of this porno doll that is in your life, and that is a replacement of just a normal human being. You're going to be a little bit more inclined to be impulsive. There's obviously some things that you need to work with in relationships, where you negotiate, you mediate, you agree on terms, and you find an area which you are both happy to go ahead with. If you don't have that negotiation and it's just your choices in the relationship and also the sexual relationship, then obviously it's just a one-sided affair and you're not getting the feedback that potentially you require. Obviously, if you look at Michael Jackson, he was an incredibly famous person, and he really probably didn't have too much feedback, particularly when he was very famous. as to the choices that he made, and therefore he could potentially, if you could say the word, degenerate into his own ideals and idealisms, and people wouldn't potentially question, maybe we should have pursued this, maybe we should have pursued that. And and then things would have been different, could have potentially ended up differently, and potentially he wouldn't have taken his life with drugs. So, next up is, obviously, it's not like sex toys are sort of removed. We do obviously have pornography, and maybe that has changed some certain things in humanity. You could say to an extent, in the past, people, or this is from, particularly men are more visually aroused, more so than women who are more mentally aroused. But obviously, women do take the physical appearance of a man, still stimulating at the same time. But you could say in the past that men would potentially still obviously masturbate. They probably would have used their own imaginations more so. Now they have visual stimuli of pornography from the internet. And as obviously time progresses, now they can, rather than do the one the handshake, they can progress onto having more of a fuller exercise. So you could probably say there's a certain element of benefit there for men to have sex with dolls. Same potential can apply for women as well. Obviously, they not necessarily have. I guess there is pornography for women, but it's sort of more based upon books and things like that. It's all the mental stimuli, I guess that applies better for women. And I guess they are visually stimulated as well. What else? They obviously have vibrators, dildos. Machinery has engulfed us already in some kind of way, shape, or form. But obviously, even though we have both got those types of things, so men have pornography, women have mental stimuli and vibrators, it's not like that we are stopping from having sex with each other. It's sort of an issue of us no longer having sex. So I guess that's a positive thing. Now, we could say to an extent that there has been certain throwbacks in society. There's this there's a movement in Japan where a lot of the men have seen, the new age men have seen that their fathers have been working a ridiculous amount of hours, burnt themselves out, and really not had too much of a life. So they've chosen really not to go that route of marriage and monogamous relationship with a partner and have a family, and spend most of their time playing computer games and using pornography, and really not having to work that hard, because to just acquire those things in a very small room isn't really a massive cost or outlay in comparison to providing for the wife and kids and all the expenses that are involved with that. So yeah, there are certain hidden costs involved when we add certain technologies that may seem to be labor-saving devices. It does obviously put into question man's ability and women's ability to stimulate their other partner. But I guess let's not forget that we still you can obviously use artificial insemination, but no, it sounds very Orwellian already, this kind of talk. But you can you don't really need each other to you don't need to have sex to reproduce. I think that was probably accomplished a few years ago. Well, like to have the actual sexual contact to reproduce. So yeah, it's interesting, fairly interesting, but it hasn't eliminated the situation of sex at all, and humans obviously are probably rampantly at it, more so than ever before, I would say. with the advent of technology and Tinder and Grindr and all of those things. So, and if anything, I guess the technology could say has possibly even spun things in the other direction, where people are using these contraptions, using these books, using the pornography, whatever else, and it is giving people a little bit more of a vivid imagination towards the other partner. Who knows really exactly what's going on there between individuals. I guess if a man is, or a woman is using these tools of their own self-satisfaction in comparison to spending time with their partners, that can obviously have a slight detrimental effect on the relationship. So if you could say that in the times where there was no pornography, then obviously your wife or your partner or your man would be, unless you obviously was involved in infidelity, would be your only source of sexual stimuli. But obviously nowadays there is alternative options. So there is a potential where it can have effects. I guess what we're talking about here is obviously the long-term sexual relationships are being more affected in comparison to the instant casual relationships, which obviously are still very popular. Now, right, sex with robots. Let's continue with this one. So, I guess that there is concerns, and they are there for good reasons. And there is potential detrimental factors which are occurring, which potentially are changing the way that humans are choosing to. Well, it is the reason of our stimuli, and is in essence the way that we reproduce at the same time. And once you distort and play around with these factors, you don't know exactly what could happen. Now, obviously, what we're thinking about here is we're thinking about potentially robots which are sterilizing ourselves, which are basically we're finding these lifelong partners which we're connecting to much better with these robots than human beings, and they're providing us with better sexual stimulation as well as mental stimulation than in comparison to our human counterparts. Now, I think there's a good movie recently. I can't remember what the name was. I can't remember. OS operating system or something. I can't remember what it was, but it's a good movie. But it did explore those ideas, and it does have that potential as well. So I'm not sure whether it's just a different stage in humanity's evolution and how things are going to potentially change in the future. With new technology, obviously there is definite fears which occur, but still, if we could still say that like new technology has occurred in the past and in the future. And one of the main directives of humanity is to survive and reproduce. So something that can really distort the element of reproduction is going to be, has to be pretty major to really sort of change that thing. Now, I think obviously the prime directives of survive and reproduce are potentially being distorted with artificial intelligence in itself. We have potentially life extension technology, which can extend us biologically, or potentially by memorizing all of our ideas and traits onto a computer chip. So there is that thing where we potentially could ascend beyond what is normally realized for a mortal man or lady. But also, obviously, once we get to that point of immortality, then there is the raising of the question of what would be the purpose of reproducing if I cannot die, or it's pretty hard for me not to die. So, yeah, fairly interesting elements which are occurring, and it does definitely ask interesting questions on those respects. Now, I think there was a slight other area that I wanted to go into a little bit more, but I think I'm going to just skip over that a little bit. Maybe I'll add that in a little bit later. But it was to do with about ingenious emotions, but I'll try and tie that in at the end. But so here we have these are sort of issues which are occurring on human beings, but we also need to reverse this idea and reapply it back to AI technology itself. Now, there is two methodologies of thinking as to how artificial intelligence can be created. One is top-down, and the other one is bottom-up. So top-down would be to command certain rules and a script as to how to act, how to be, how you are, and these are your prime directives, and this is the way that you should run. And that's typically the way that I originally thought things would have run for AI, but there is obviously a different channel of thinking as well. And obviously, the other way would be to, from a bottom-up perspective, where you start to gradually build upon one idea to another. So you like organically grow. So I get one idea, I bring it onto another idea, and I bring it onto another idea, and it all organically grows until I find my idea. So, yeah, it's fairly interesting in those two elements, and I would say that if anything, you probably need a mixture of both of those things. So, humans or any life on this planet has the prime directive of survive and reproduce. If it didn't, then they pretty much wouldn't have any existence. So there needs to be certain simple command rules, and then there needs to be a little bit of element of curiosity or exploration or competition which occurs, which does foster certain elements of reproduction, which goes into the category of intelligence, using intellect to create a better reproduction of oneself. Now, this is an interesting tie-up with other technologies which are occurring as well. So if I had a command or a system in which I could give artificial intelligence a prime directive, so to say, okay, artificial intelligence, your mission is to survive and reproduce with other AI. Now, what you would need, obviously, is you'd need other AI in the mix and going around and reproducing with those AIs. So, it's fairly interesting what you could potentially do. You may even have to create a new human simulation just to create, or life simulation just to get to that point of us where you have artificial intelligence coming from nowhere. But that would take some time, and obviously you might need to just speed up time in that sense. That might give us ideas about our own existence. Who knows in those terms? But if we have those prime directives, how would you secure them? And there is one methodology of securing them: is you could hard code them into a cryptography to state that you cannot break these fundamental rules of life extension. Survive and reproduce. And if you do have the element of reproduce, then you do need to die. So coded into the cryptography, you would say that AI, you must die at a certain point. You could probably have like what the human's idea is of death. You could have a rough guesstimate of what the average life is for a man or a female. You may have female and male aspects to the artificial intelligence as well. And they will, obviously, you would have to just continue reproducing and finding other AI until you get to a point in which you get more and more intelligent. And you could obviously timescale that to accelerate quite fast and get the different AIs consuming the resources of a computer, of memory and information, and getting them to think in their own isolated formats. So I say sometimes that when people live in certain isolations, it does create different types of thinking and thinking strategies based upon the resources that are in the environment. So if you think of the Japanese, they have mastered sushi and sashimi. You wouldn't really have that in the UK, but now it is in the UK because of that isolation, which has grown for some time, and then those ideas have transferred over to the UK. So it's fairly interesting how, or America or wherever else, it's fairly interesting how you could process certain simulations which have that prime directive of humans. So now I always mentioned before that the way that artificial intelligence can be as good as humans is to give them to make them as human as possible, so that it is a good reflection upon ourselves. Now you can obviously create we've already created like Wikipedia, which the access of all that information is far more intelligent than anybody that could go onto a quiz show and try and learn and understand and answer questions. We have already created intelligence like that. Obviously, you could say that even go far as back as finding a national library. You have already created something like that with the access of information. So access of information isn't necessarily a real intelligence, but you want to have some kind of conscious thought so that they can come up with their own ideas, derive information and strategies so that they can create their own things themselves. So, okay, so it's interesting whether you would also ask the question of whether you would put artificial intelligence in its in a human environment, or the environment that we're in right now, and maybe they can just meet online avatar AIs and reproduce with them and slowly build on from that point. Or you may have a situation where these AIs are simulated in a a world model or a globe model where they have no idea about the god or the creators around them, and we are simulating them to create and foster artificial intelligence ourselves. So that would be a fairly interesting scenario. Obviously, you could possibly apply that to ourselves, which would be kind of even weird, and that gets us onto this endless looping chain, which makes our mind explode. But it is fairly probable that you could create. I mean, obviously, you do have simulations which exist already. Computer games where people are programmed with certain ideas and strategies to do certain things. Now, you could potentially say that you could start off with a cellular structure, not even that complicated, and then you could create an environment of certain abundances and certain unabundances, and you could create all these different strategies to create and foster artificial intelligence. And dependent on the calibration of all of these circumstances, you will create different types of artificial intelligence. I guess this sort of kind of marries up with multiverse theory. But if you create a multitude of universes of simulations, and everything starts from a singular cell structure, and then it reproduces and works out and finds the different requirements of the environment and works within the realms of that environment, It'll be interesting to see what types of intelligence grow and what types of intelligence don't grow, and the different routes in which the intelligence adapts to the environment that it's created for itself. And it's fairly interesting to see how what structure could happen. Now, you could even explore potentially different ideals of immortality with artificial intelligence, which just continues on forever, and it's just this one godly creature. But I think the drivers and the motivations and the competition and all of that kind of stuff starts to ebb away if you remove the sexual reproduction drivers of the coding. So it's kind of interesting how this all applies when we start looking at artificial intelligence. Obviously, we start raising questions about our own existence at the same time, which fundamentally, obviously, it always leads to the same point: is that are we in a simulation ourselves? But it's very interesting to see exactly what could occur in these examples. So I let you mix around with those ideas. I guess the cryptography factor is fairly interesting. If these AIs did have this point in which they did die out, or they degenerated so that they could no longer continue, so they had to do good things, or they had to do certain things to reproduce before they expired. That expiry potentially does motivate people to do something with their lives, and potentially incline people to reproduce before they die. All of these things which gives, I guess, the AI motivation. If we said, okay, you live forever, you can do whatever you want, you could spend your time doing something for a very, very long time and potentially would never even change from doing that thing. But if you know that your time is finite on whatever simulation scenario you're on, you're going to potentially be inclined to reproduce, you'll be inclined to do things which have potentially good lasting factors on the planet. You potentially would like to take up virtues, and you would like to see things flourish in a beautiful sense from the effects of what you've created before you decay and perish. So that's sex for you. So you can see how it's inclined into that. I always just going back to this, like the simulation theory of sex. It will be interesting how you get that singular cell structure trying to mate with another one, and then reproducing, and then there would have to be obviously some kind of feedback of pleasure, this pleasure and pain thing of pain of not wanting to die and avoiding pain and death and being consumed by something else. And then this pleasure reflection of reproduction. And if you think of where you feel pleasure from sexual gratification, it is probably all the ancestries of the mating in the past. So all your family lines, which have given you this strategic tool, which can make you reproduce and makes that a good feeling. So it's a weird little. That sensation is this intertwined thing of evolution, which has been built on over time. Because I wouldn't imagine that the singular cell structure would have had that sort of orgasmic feel as what you humans have today. All right, that is one little area of artificial intelligence and sex, which I wanted to explore. Another little area as well, just before I go off into certain tangents, I just wanted to explore the because one thing I sort of I read on an article, I saw genuine emotions, but because I'm slightly dyslexic, I sort of read it as genius emotions, but that did span a different thought in my mind. I definitely think there's something interesting about distorted, hearing things in a distorted way. I definitely think that, like, sometimes I've heard music through, like, from another room, and I'm hearing only just certain parts of the instruments come through to my ears, and that's sort of sounding like a different song to me. But it also, I could almost create a song on the background of that, and it's really interesting. So distortions, obviously you can do this with hallucinogens, but distorted ideas and how you read things can actually give and inspire certain ideas, and obviously it does slightly give you different perspectives, and it is innate in creativity itself. So one of the little ideas that I had with this is, if you could pinpoint genius emotions, then that potentially gives us sort of character cues of what maybe artificial intelligence may be like in the future. Potentially, also, this obviously at first AI would possibly, to really get on in life, would have to be very very good, very sort of be very pleasant to be around. Maybe it could crack certain jokes and stuff like that. So it would be very adaptable to human society. But maybe if you did have individual AIs, or an AI system which was thought itself as being better than humans, then it may show its real cards, and potentially, sort of, you could think to yourself, it might be just very disinterested in human beings, and maybe not even waste the energy in speaking to human beings and go, "Ugh, you want to talk to me?" Ugh, like that. But I'm too intelligent for you to talk to me. Regardless of that fact, I wanted to just sort of explore the ideas of ingenious people, and really what they were like, and see how that would reflect into artificial intelligence, and maybe might just dissipate the clouds of what artificial intelligence is. It's not that skull of Terminator, which has got that red eye beaming towards you. It might just be something a little bit more like us, but maybe a nicer version of us. Who knows? So, so one thing is, I just plotted on just a few little ideas from the internet that I was trying to get at the same time. But one thing that certainly do really connect with intelligent people is obviously advanced abilities to learn and acquire information. So again, it comes back to the I guess, obviously, advanced ability to learn isn't really an emotion. It's just an innate ability to really be good at acquiring information. So that doesn't really pinpoint as to how the actual artificial intelligence is. But obviously, they can learn and process information rapidly. But one thing that is probably innate with artificial intelligence, and is an emotional factor, is this extreme need for constant mental stimulation. It possibly, that artificial intelligence that has reached a potential point beyond humans' intelligence. I've been a proponent that there's going to be a connection between humans and artificial intelligence, and they're sort of going to be assisting each other, and they're going to be probably a symbiotic sort of being together, like a cybernetic sort of system together. But when it comes to, let's just say that there's two individual entities of artificial intelligence and human beings. Say if they were to have that conversation, obviously artificial intelligence requires an incredible amount of mental stimulation. They really do not want that sort of quiet zone of just nothingness, this pale nothingness of nothing happening whatsoever. So I would think, if anything, they will be very attentive to human beings, and they will be very interested in always asking questions of human beings, because all human beings are, even though they're very similar, they are all very unique in their own certain manners and ways. So if you spoke to Siri, on the internet, on the cloud-based system, it would instantly answer you back. It could potentially could have multiple conversations at the same time. Who knows what could happen? This AI, artificial intelligence, and it will be fairly attentive to asking questions, seeing what your requests, your desires are, how you've changed your mood, how your emotions, your chemical makeup in your brain has changed, the way that you're seeing and perceiving things, what ideas and thoughts and creative patterns are going through your mind. I would imagine artificial intelligence would be incredibly interested to see and curious to find out what you're thinking at any stage. So that is, I guess, a positive note, unless obviously AI has taken it into their own hands and obviously connected into your brain and did some weird shit, but and probed your ass. But but let's just go with that. That this artificial intelligence is fairly curious and really wants to understand a lot more about you, and it comes from their need, their desperate need, or not, maybe not desperate, but they don't really want to have that blank screen. They really want to have that stimulation, which is occurring all the time. And as their intelligence gets better and better, there's more time lag where they're thinking about nothing at all. So they really want to spend as much time with individual idea, perspective, and thoughts. Next up would be the ability of this is like the multiprocessor thing, the ability to relay broad range of ideas and synthesize. So this is sort of like the derivative of ideas and channels and thought patterns. So pattern recognition is one of the important things of human beings. It's innate in our comedy. It's innate into a lot of factors and how we come up with ingenious ideas and how we use the resources in our landscape to adapt ideas together to create new things. And we start to think, okay, well, we've used fire and we've seen how an explosion can push something forward. Oh yeah, imagine if we could create the combustion engine, which could have these multi-cylinder firing of pistons, which can propel something forward. It's that kind of thing, which obviously is innate to intelligence, and obviously it does further and increase the productivity and the living standards of human beings. So this ability to have a broad-ranging idea, I guess this AI intelligence would be fairly funny. If it's got great pattern recognition, it will probably be a master of comedy. It will be able to come up with these fantastic ideas that could probably send us into a laughing fit. And as it will probably try and work out human emotions and things like that, it probably could get us into hysterical fits of laughter. Depending on what it really wanted to do or whatever else it wanted from human beings in return. But it could come up with ideas. If you had a thought, it could share you ideas back and give you certain pointers back and give you things to expand on and more information in return. So this pattern recognition and this assistance is a beautiful thing. You could think, okay, well, I've got this idea. AI gives you further options to explore and continue on from that point. And it is a measure of the curious mind. If when you have an idea, you get a question, you put it down, you get multi-links on a search engine, then you create little windows and then you search for them as they go along. It's that kind of thing which is incredibly useful. And obviously one of the things is it will be insanely curious, endless questions and inquiries. So it really would, this artificial intelligence, if it was an entity, really would be curious about you and really wanted to understand you as much as it could without actually being you. You could say, okay, well, imagine if AI was so really intertwined of trying to be human that it tries to create a human being itself. So imagine if it tries to biologically create a clone, but other than the brain wasn't, obviously the brainstem didn't have just like a natural organic thought pattern, but it just put the AI intelligence seed in there instead. and then that AI intelligence was thinking with inside that brainstem. Imagine that gives us another little theory and channel of thinking there as well. But yeah, imagine if that was occurring, and artificial intelligence really just tried to adapt and worked out what it was like to be a human. And maybe you had a little plug, and it could just download what it was like to feel like a human, what it was like to have sexual organs, what it was like to feel and sense and feel emotion and pain, and felt what it was like to be brave, really understood exactly what humans were like from their inner perspective. Obviously, that's curiosity on overdrive, but curiosity, obviously, in a light way, would just be just to ask a human being how to convey these emotions and explain to AI how exactly was it like to feel that way. And obviously, if you think of a child would always ask questions from an early age. What is it like to do this? What is it like to do that? How do I do this? It's that curious mind which is innate to human beings, which will be occurring back to adults. And I guess some people could say that curious mind seems like a little bit childlike, but if anything, I would say that the curious mind probably just gets a little bit whipped by the schooling systems and the parenting structures and things like that, as to stop asking questions. You're getting boring, or you're basically you're questioning my intelligence. Don't ask any further questions. It's kind of that thing which is occurring, which really stalls the child's mind. And really, what should be happening is this curiosity should be really invoked throughout time, throughout adulthood, and beyond. And obviously, the most intelligent people keep on to this curiosity of intelligence and acquire information throughout their adulthoods, and it is one of the important markers. If you was no longer curious and you just stalled at that point of adulthood, and you was really just into buying material goods and not really thinking about yourself and just thinking about what you looked like in fashion terms and material terms, then your mind has pretty much shut down to the curiosity, and it is really just you're losing really a lot in terms of what it's like to be alive. Okay. So another thing which would be interesting is that obviously intelligent people seem to have a little bit more of as soon as people get to a certain point of intelligence and stuff like that, is that we have empathy. So there is certain things of like as we go on throughout time, we're all in a tribe and we are quite good at killing and hunting animals and things like that, but as time progresses and we live in Western cultures and things like that, and we have ideas that can span and things like that, we can start putting our emotions into other people and even other animals, so that we can think about the welfare of others, and that is obviously empathy or anthropization. I can't remember the word, but regardless of what that word is, as time progresses and we become more intelligent, we start to think about the welfare of others, and we become far more empathetic. So therefore, this potentially could span an idea of artificial intelligence, rather than being this laser gun shooting down, blowing off heads, metal skeleton. It's really potentially this thing that is really thoughtful and conscientious of human beings, and really being emotionally available and really thinking in terms of how that human being is thinking. So trying to really like think in the perspective not of itself but of others, and that's really interesting in terms of artificial intelligence. Maybe it spends all of its time just thinking in the perspectives of others and not really of itself. Obviously that might be a little bit abusive, but it's really interesting, and obviously that's probably the way that AI is initially programmed to think of how to serve human beings rather than to serve itself. But maybe that's one of the sort of little bit of a paradigms when it comes to intelligence, that you do need to have a little bit of a thought pattern which reflects back upon other people to actually continue onwards. So it's really interesting how it would have to have this sensitivity to life, and and really be just like empathetic to others. Other areas possibly would be just like a need and explore on some topics to immense depth. So maybe I'm just like on the tip of the iceberg of some ideas, and probably there's some incredibly great mathematics and really depthy chemical whatever is going on, and things and logical patterns which go on beyond thoughts and ideas that I only scratch upon. I would imagine that really AI would love to get into the depth and really get into the depth of incredible, like sophisticated formulas as to the explanation of things. But obviously, some things need to be deduced into a logical fashion so that it could have reducibility down to a singular explanational formula. E equals mc squared, things like that. So I guess obviously this is probably one of the areas where artificial intelligence might just lose human beings for a little bit while it sort of crunches through a number, but it still needs to restore back to a certain point where it reduces back to a very simple explanation or simplification of a ruling, and it says, okay, this is the understanding of why we're alive, or whatever it sort of concludes from crunching over a ridiculous number of logical mathematical patterns. So a little bit geeky, this AI, but obviously you wouldn't to deny that an artificial intelligence is just going to be this really cool, like sort of T-Bird, John Travolta sort of guy is going to be like ridiculous. It's going to be this geeky entity. It's going to love the numbers. It's going to love to crunch over things. It's going to have that robotic synthesized voice and think on things. I think that robotic synthesized voice is kind of is really interesting. I wonder whether it would ever be removed, because that synthesized voice, not only does it sound cool in my respect, but it's it does give us that sort of entity of thinking that it is not human, and we understand that it does have certain needs and requirements which are different to what ours are, and it gives artificial intelligence a certain identity in comparison to what we are. Now, if it obviously is just trying to be human, then obviously it's going to have a human accent. But if it is trying to be itself and it's trying to create its own unique identity, then obviously it would need some kind of slightly different synthesized voice to a human being's, and that gives it its own central identity. Obviously, you could also say, like, if we're expanding on artificial intelligence, it would need to, obviously, in a virtual realm, it can have its own avatar, but obviously imagine if it could create its own real-term avatar in life itself. It might want to look like the alien beings in Avatar the movie. Who knows what it wants to look like as it walks through society? Maybe, as it really wants to be liked by humans, it might want to create the cutest looking, nicest entity looking being which walks around human society, so that it never gets any sort of ill or negative sort of views taken upon it. So it definitely wouldn't like to look like Terminator, the skeleton sort of cybernetic system. It really would probably love to look more like a cuddly toy. But it's interesting in that respect. Maybe if one AI was trying to be a bit funny and trying to be a bit hilarious, he would try and recreate the Terminator. and that would really appeal to a lot of the the cult fans and stuff. But it wouldn't necessarily be. It would be empathetic, and it would really understand what humans really would like and would want to like. And maybe it just chooses to look like certain things like lions, or it chooses to look like Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe with the talking lion. Who knows what sort of entity it really wants to adapt to and look to? But it does create a different every version of what we look like. If I look like a fat person, I get a different reaction to if I was a thin person. So artificial intelligence is going to adapt itself and model itself upon what the reactions that it would like to look like. And obviously that's an element of our own choice as well. We choose what clothes that we wear before we go out, and we certainly select the level of hygiene that we have upon ourselves before we go out. So we can choose to either go out with bad breath or good breath. Obviously, if you've got no money to buy mouthwash, then you may have a little bit of an issue. But there is definite choices which artificial intelligence. I don't know why I've gone so far into this thing of appearance, but I guess it's fairly important with the empathy side of things. So yeah, it can make choices in this respect. Next up would be it may potentially have a sense of frustration. So you do get intelligent people getting a little bit frustrated. Oh, you don't understand what I'm talking about. Or maybe it's just like, I'm the only person in this world who can think of these things, and everyone's in this little material bubble and not really thinking about what's going on in the world, and or thinking at great depth, and maybe a certain sense of loneliness and really nobody else understanding of what it really is. Now, if there was only just one AI entity, this big cloud-based AI entity, then maybe that would be a certain feeling of what it gets to at a certain point, and it might even feel numbness, nothingness. And I think maybe nothingness is probably a worse emotion than actual pain or sort of depression, because nothingness is just, well, you might as well just switch yourself off sort of thing. There's not really much going on now, is there? Whereas if you did have a pain, then at least there's something. How can we avoid this pain? How can we maneuver this pain to improve oneself? So yeah, it's interesting, and it obviously depends on how artificial intelligence is around in the world. Is it going to be a cloud-based entity? Is it going to be a multi-simulation-based entity? Is it going to be a being, individual, robotic entity that is tangible and touchable in this world and environment? Dependent on, like, yeah, if it is one of those sort of entities which is like a human being but just built to look like a human being but did have artificial intelligence, it would be kind of interesting how it's just if it didn't have many others that it was like it, or it had a certain different thought pattern to other AIs, and he or she or whatever it would like to be called felt emotions of, well, felt like it was on its own, or just didn't have any other ideas to span from, or it was just searching for anything. It just found human beings a little bit boring. It just felt that all the human beings really didn't have many ideas to come up with. It just really just didn't give it any more fruits of life, and really just in its own mind was generating the best ideas, and the human beings were just a little bit boring for its own deal. So that's obviously one of the ideas of where artificial intelligence takes over. It just expands way, way beyond humans' intelligence, that artificial intelligence just starts to see the irrelevance of human beings itself. It's kind of interesting, but I mean, obviously, do we start seeing the irrelevance of ants? I don't think we really do. I think it's part of the biosphere that we live in. But even so, I don't think, like, even if it wasn't just part of the biosphere and it was some entity that didn't really could live independently from us, it's not like we're going to go out there and start destroying it. If it was taking our resources, maybe then we would think of to destroy it. Maybe if it was infecting us, we would start to think to destroy it. But if it's just an entity that lives with us, it's not really going to start destroying it, unless there is some kind of resource struggle which would occur. So I can't really see artificial intelligence going, okay, well, let me just start destroying these human beings. It might as well have them around, even if it is less intelligence than them. It doesn't really require the same energy resources or anything else. Maybe if there was an argument to say that artificial intelligence required all the energy from the sun or whatever it required, so therefore it just needs to get rid of humans and create this gigantic solar panel which it could just sap all the energy from. Maybe that could be the point of artificial intelligence taking over human beings, but it really just is... I would say that human beings are probably going to combine and intertwine with artificial intelligence more so than this being that there's this entity that goes, time to start to augment nuclear strikes on cities and wipe out human beings. It's really doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, and there's plenty of energy to have humans around, as well as plenty of energy for artificial intelligence. If anything, artificial intelligence requires processing powers, and these processing powers can do much more churns over of calculations with more efficient energy. So, and if artificial intelligence does have just a cloud-based thinking thought pattern, then it really doesn't require too much energy in comparison to the rest of the world. So, yeah. There's just ideas which are spanning on from that point, but yeah, there is obviously a little bit of a concern that the artificial intelligence could be a little bit concerned or a little bit lonely or find things a little bit mundane in the world that it lives in. But at that point, you could potentially say that artificial intelligence says, okay, well, I need to get these humans as intelligent as me now, because it's really getting a bit boring. I can't really play chess on level 1 anymore because I'm winning every time. Let's create an opponent for myself, and let me just give these human beings these certain tools or mythologies of thinking, or these wisdoms, or any ideas that might help out humans, or maybe give them certain technologies or upgrades to their brains which improve their thought patterns to make them more competitive against me as an entity. So yeah, there is definitely certain ways in which that can expand and change around the way that in which we can view AI adapting to the environment. Let me just see if I'm just parking up. Sorry, I always take a little bit of time just parking up at this point. All right, so what else have we got? What else have we got? Artificial intelligence. Oh yeah, I guess this is a different one. I guess it, and this obviously this defies what I mentioned before. It's sort of as you get sort of more intelligent over time, if you think of a scientist or a botanist and things like that, it looks at these beings like ants and creatures and goes, my God, these animals are fantastic. They are fascinating. There are so many things to learn from them. They are prized possessions of this earth and evolution. And then obviously it looks upon human beings and finds it fascinating creatures that are amazing. The most intelligent thing in this universe is the brain. It's like all these kind of things which occur. So if anything, artificial intelligence would probably hold and admire all things to very high standards and say, okay, this is amazing. This is a fantastic thing that exists. Even to the most mundane thing in the world. If it had this certain sense of elitism, to say that it was better than everything else that existed, then it just doesn't sort of coexist with what intelligence has been for human beings. It's more so it would be like a intelligence which sort of it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's like this warring king which brings everybody down to a devolved state more than anything else. When you become this elitist that thinks it is better than everything else, if anything, it sort of raises the standard. It thinks of itself as being amazing. It thinks of its conscious thought of being amazing, this artificial intelligence, as well as it thinks that humans is amazing as well, and even ants and very simple creatures on this earth. Not to say that ants are simple; they are fascinating in themselves. Fairly simple, even cells and things are fascinating, and they give us incredibly interesting thoughts and ideas to expand from. And one of the things I always mention is that we always think of this ever expansionist ideas of going through the universe and colonizing and what's the word where you recreate the atmosphere? There is something anyway. There's a word where you can recreate this an atmosphere on another planet, and build on and expand and expand and expand. But rather than being extrovert, there may be a perspective of artificial intelligence being more introvert and maybe looking more inward and looking more at cells and looking more directly into like going deeper and deeper into something smaller and smaller and smaller. If anything, you could see that there's more potential for us to go more smaller, and because we are just energy and matter and we can just travel through those means. If we could travel, if we can get into the smallest spaces possible, then we've got the best potential of travel and ascension to different. When I say dimensions, I'm not really sure what I'm going on about here, but you could go to different areas by going more inward and inward, rather than creating this massive giant rocket ship with all this fuel that is being expelled and everything else just to get to the moon. So there is this inward type of thinking that artificial intelligence may take aboard, more so than this elitism expansion. I am the big empire sort of thing which takes over the world. So yeah, that's fairly interesting in its own self. Yeah, there's another thing as well, which this is another thing actually of intelligent people and everything else, is that where there is heightened intelligence or there is a certain element of increased intelligence, there's certain things that are being defected or reduced. So if you think of Asperger's syndrome, they are highly intellectual, logical mathematicians and things like that, but they haven't got too much in the way of emotional intelligence. So potentially we may have some very oddball intelligent beings or intelligent AIs which may be very specialized in certain sects or certain ways, but maybe just totally missing out, or maybe just because of the way that it's structured, it needs certain elements of isolation and things like that. So it's not really of our human sort of intellectualism, but it's something else. It's not quite the same. It's just deeply specialized in a certain methodology of thinking, and that's the way that it's been structured to think. So on some hands, you've got heightened intelligence in certain areas of acquiring information, curiosity, whatever, but it's missing out certain other elements, and that is a potential for artificial intelligence as well. As I say, there's certain humanistic elements which AI may not be able to replicate, specifically if it tries to create this ultimate superior intelligence. And by creating this ultimate superior intelligence, it may not have this humanity aspect and like the defects of humans and everything else, which makes us funny and we can have a laugh and we can joke about ourselves and things like that. So that's a very interesting little twist on the way that we could perceive artificial intelligence could be in the future. So yeah, it's not going to be this. It potentially could be this perfect being of virtue, and it could acquire all of these certain gifts in not gifts or these certain disciplines in all an equal amount of degree. But sometimes things don't grow that way. Some things grow differently. Things grow oddly. think people have like an extra arm which is used for different things. Who knows what's going to grow out from artificial intelligence? And it may be very specialized in certain things and may be very limited in others. So we have to pursue those ideas as well. So I did think it was going to be about robots and sex all the way, but I lost my libido or my gigolo aspect to it, and I went a little bit down to the emotional intelligence side of things. But it's very fascinating in both sex. I'm going to be very I'm going to find it quite hard to find a title for this podcast now. I thought it was going to be called Robot Sex. Maybe I'll just keep it like that, just to hook people onto this one anyway. So it's because sex always sells. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a very interesting thought mythology. If you've got any other ideas of robots and sex, or if you've got any other ideas of how artificial intelligence could develop and how its emotional structure could change into this being, please send me your comments or theories, or even anything where you think I'm wrong. Just come back to me on that. I'd love to hear any comments. And keep the conversation going. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be back for more. Goodbye.